and start talking about why we're really all here.
Thank you, Tina. I really appreciate the introduction. So this is Frank Cohen's voice, and Ian, say something.
Hi, Frank. Yeah, hopefully everybody out there can hear me. If you can't hear me, just send a little message and I'll speak up.
Yep. So
to be clear, Ian's the one with the accent.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be obvious when we're speaking.
Yeah, that makes me want to do an accent now. But,
I know.
We're Appvance, and basically we're here to talk about how HTML5 has changed the world of testing over the years, and kind of what you might encounter in the HTML5 world, and how Appvance could help you. Why are we the ones talking to you about HTML5? Well, we've been here. Appvance has been around for the past 10 years, and we really understand kind of the requirements for testers to do functional testing, load and performance testing, and even predictive monitoring. We want you to know too that as you're working on testing Ajax apps and rich internet apps and mobile apps, and it's late at night and nothing seems to be working, that you're not alone. Appvance is here to provide you with excellent service and support. And we have a basic belief that we're going to cover in today's webinar, that the testing that you do, especially for HTML5 apps, has to include testing of 100% of the end user experience for you to be able to create actionable knowledge and to deliver an excellent end user experience to your customers, vendors, partners, employees, whoever's using the app. So that's just a bit of introduction about who Appvance is and why we're talking to you today.
Okay, thanks, Frank. So we're going to talk about HTML5, Ajax, RIA, Web 2, Web Thick Client. We've heard all these terms. And what do they really mean? They mean this highly interactive, dynamic user experience, kind of moving wallpaper. In fact, we go around a lot to look at enterprises. There's no real boring GUIs out there anymore, Frank. I don't know if you noticed. I'm looking at accounting systems, banking systems, insurance. I do a mouse over somewhere, something pops up, what gets my feedback, etc. The days of the old form where you have one button on it, they seem to have long gone. And it's all over the mobile as well. So we're going to look at the challenges that this gives us, because these are highly desirable GUIs. Very, as I said, user-friendly, very effective and efficient for people interacting with all the websites out there. But really, they are going to throw up challenges for us in the automated verification business. And we're going to dive into some of those challenges and show you some best practices that we've adopted at Appvance, and hopefully help everybody out. So the challenges are really thrown up, not by the standard itself, HTML5, but rather by these tools. You see at the bottom of the slide here, you've got EXT.js, ZK, OSS, jQuery. You've probably heard of all these. And people are putting out HTML5 applications based on these toolkits. And it's that and how these toolkits render these widgets that gives us one of the problems that we're going to address with testing these sites. And we'll probably take a little deeper dive into those issues by looking at one of these kits, Frank. So just before we dive into looking at one of the kits, I do want to emphasize the problems that we see, and you've probably seen it yourself with testing HTML5 Ajax applications. The first one is object identification. This is going to come about because that screen that you see in HTML5 Ajax is constantly repainting itself. Whether you're in Gmail and you see new mail coming in, or whether you're going back to eBay and you're seeing your favorites refresh themselves, this whole canvas is continually repainting itself, and you're getting new IDs, new anchors, if you will, that we used to use to access these IDs, objects. And when I say objects, I mean the buttons that the automated tools are going to press. I mean the text fields that people are going to type in and the automated tools are going to type into. So that's one of the first issues we see with automating HTML5 applications. The second is timing of events. More accurately, this is us trying to synchronize our automated testing with the events that are happening on the browser, because the acronym AJAX, the A stands for asynchronous, and what's happening in the background is events are being triggered Some are going back to the server. Some are actually just going to fire something off on the browser so the browser can repaint a little area of itself. And then we need to know, when is that object ready for us to click? In other words, when is that event fired? When is it triggered? So we have to synchronize our automated testing framework so that they are in line with these events. And now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into some of these in examples of how the vendors are giving us these challenges with their HTML5 toolkits.
Yeah, it's not like the vendors of these toolkits are out there like to cause problems, but at the same time, there's no standards bodies, standing behind any of these toolkits. So, for example, there's no like standard wait for Ajax element to be idle, wait for it to finish. So here's an example of using the ZK toolkit, and it's painted this nice screen. And if I take a look at the ID for this screen for a particular element, you can see it says EHPX0. Now look at what happens if I go and refresh the page. It's showing me the same element, but if I inspect the element, you can see that the ID has changed. And that's because the JavaScript that's repainting this page, it's doing so dynamically according to what it needs to do to display the correct information in that web object. And that web object might be looking at a back-end server to see if a new set of messages have come in, or if a new set of prices have been updated, or in the case of like Best Buy, if a new open box product becomes available on the showroom floor. All of this is going to be done automatically by the JavaScript that's running in this page, and there's no standards body for any of the kind of test automation platforms to turn to and say, yeah, these are the APIs that all of these Ajax toolkits are going to follow to make sure that the test script that we've written automatically stays in sync with the app itself. And so that's the first big problem that we've got: dynamic object identification.
Yes, Frank, and also if we look at that, we see it says div ID. In other words, there's no real object behind that screen that says, I'm an array or I'm a drop-down button. It's basically painted with this almost maze of cells and divs.
Yeah.
And
yeah, as a matter of fact, there's some things that we're starting to depend on in these toolkits. Like, I want to see a breadcrumb display showing me like where I've been and be able to rapidly navigate back to that. But there's nothing in the HTML5 standard that says, here's the identification of a breadcrumb. So the test tools are left with without an easy ability to kind of make contextual sense out of what the Ajax toolkits are doing on the screen. Instead, it's really up to us testers to like figure that out.
Yeah, Frank, there's certainly a lot of busy work going on in the background that we have to pick up on. Mm-hmm. Another aspect of that, of what's happening in the background with an Ajax application, is really the HTTP requests that are being fired off and going back to the server to pull back little pieces, little snippets of information that is then rendered on the screen. Here's an example of that. You go to Google, and I'm sure I've seen a lot of enterprise apps where we type in customer names, etc. And what happens is, as you begin typing, the server is going to reply with you with hits on the first few letters that you typed in. And in order to do this, the browser is going to send little snippets of request as we got above with the first few letters of the word, and then the server is going to return hits on that first few words. This challenge is going to be particular in load testing, because as we look at tools that try and recreate this traffic, how would we recreate that type of series of HTTP requests, remembering that we might have to parameterize this, as we don't want to really have everybody, we don't want to have 1,000 users that we're simulating typing in the same search term. We're going to have them typing in multiple search terms. We're going to have to parameterize this. Right. It throws up a really big challenge for load testing in Ajax.
Yeah, so like the old legacy test platforms that I might use, I could say, okay, here's a step of my test where I'm going to do a search for the term function. And now what I have to do in an Ajax environment is figure out how to simulate what the Ajax object is going to do as I'm typing. So it's not enough for me to just create a discrete test step that says search for function. Instead, now I have to search for F, and then FU, then FUCH, that kind of thing.
Yeah. As I said, it makes for a highly interactive experience with the user, But I think we're beginning to see a pattern of the challenges that this type of application is throwing up to us test automators.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. It's that the tests now in an HTML5 environment have to emulate and drive the app just like you're a real user. It's not enough to create a simulation of what's happening to the back end. Instead, you actually have to drive the app through the front end.
Okay.
So just quickly, we haven't had any questions from the audience yet, but what I would actually like to ask our audience is whether they agree or disagree with some of the challenges that you guys have presented, and they're welcome to enter into the questions area any other challenges that they feel are really facing them. I realize you guys are going to move into some best practices, but perhaps at the end of the session we can address some other challenges that folks are seeing.
Sure.
Yeah, sure, Tina. So I'm certain on the call today there's many, many people that have come up with this expression, XPath. In fact, XPath came into the vocabulary, I think maybe 7 years ago, but I can't remember. It came in when Ajax really started to take off, and we realized, that is the people who were writing automated testing at that time, that we could no longer rely on those IDs, those names, as anchor points. In other words, exactly the illustration that you gave us, Frank, was true. In 1 or 2 seconds after we had seen as an ID, we go back to that screen, that ID becomes something else. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it begs the question of what exactly is an ID. You know, we'd always think that that was how we identified things.
Right.
It's not the case. So back then we started to look at XPath, regular expressions, to try and get down to that field. And they look like this. And as I said, all those divs at the top, /div/div. And in fact, when I first saw this, Frank, I thought you'd invented this, put a few more divs in there for dramatic effect. Mm-hmm. But I know it's a real example that we've picked up on. And this goes back to the way the vendors are painting these screens in the background. They're coming up with all these structures.
Yeah, whatever structure they need to make it look beautiful and interactive. That's what their goal is, but they're not aligned with what the tester's goal is, which is to make sense of what the structure is doing.
Exactly. And maybe you can talk about this best practice that we got here at Appvance for us to identify that field that is identified by that XPath. We've got this little expression below that looks like a natural language to me.
Yeah. So, I don't wake up in the morning and think in terms of XPath expressions. And, I think the world probably... Yeah, I think the world probably has a few of them, but it's not me. Okay. Instead, I need something that's more natural language. So I've included a screenshot here showing you a typical Ajax table. This table literally has hundreds of web objects in it. And if I were to rely just on XPath to get to a particular cell and figure out whether the value is correct or not, then I'd have to deal with these crazy long XPath expressions. Instead, I would prefer a kind of a natural language expression, to locate the item as though I'm a real person. I mean, Ian and I might be on the phone to one another in separate offices, and imagine Ian trying to describe to me that we need the value from the American Express Company's row under the change column. He would describe it that way instead of describing /div/div/div. So what we've done with Appvance Enterprise is to establish a natural language accessor system, and that's this bullet here. So literally, I'm going to look for the cell that's near the American Express Company, and under the column that's change. So if I were to evaluate this expression, I would get the value back of this cell, and then I could take a look at the text and say it's 0.01.
Yeah, Frank, and also there's another elegance to this type of identification, and that is it's going to be robust, because I mean in this little app we're looking at now, it's I guess it's stock prices, when they've changed, etc. We could add a data column in there, and this expression still would hold.
Right.
We would still be able to identify that change cell that is near the American Express Company, even after we've manipulated this screen a little bit. As you can see, if we started to do that with that XPath, we'd really be chasing our tails, to say the least, to try and keep up with the screen changes that might take place over time.
Yeah, somebody would have to chain me to a desk for a number of days and maybe give me good antibiotics or something to figure out the XPath expression instead of this natural language expression.
Natural language always seems to make more sense, right?
I think so, yeah. Because we're all human beings here, we can understand each other. So let me show you an example of this in the Appvance Enterprise product. This is Appvance Enterprise 7.01, which we're working on a release imminently. I can tell it to start a recording here and point it to a tutorial app that comes with Appvance Enterprise that gives me that web table. So here I'll just click on starting the app. I'll click over here on company list, and then you can see here's that list and it's actually running. Now, if I wanted to figure out how to point to that American Express row and get the value under the expression, I can either have the Appvance Enterprise Designer figure that out for me. It does that automatically. Or I could type in my own expression into the Evaluate tab here, tell it to get me the text from that particular cell, and then click on Evaluate Page. This is going to have the Appvance Enterprise Designer send that natural language expression over to the app, and then in a live fashion it's going to return the result. So here the result should be 0.01, and you can see the result in the designer is 0.01. Now I can very easily change this to take a look at any of the other web objects that are in this table by just changing the cell definition. So here I'll look for Intel Corporation, for example. I click Evaluate. It's talking to the actual web objects in the page to point to get a result of 0.031, which is the text in that cell. By using this designer, I can start with kind of a recording of the app, but then I have this tremendous designer script language that includes these natural language expressions to figure out how to drive the app as an end user would. And from there, Appvance Enterprise makes it very easy for me to run this test as a functional test or a performance test, either on my local machine or in the cloud.
So we actually had a question from the audience, and Frank, I think your demo here may have just answered it. The question that came in was, is this an example only or actual accessor language code line by Appvance?
It's the actual accessor language that's built into Appvance Enterprise.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, then we were ready for his answer or his question, and we didn't know it yet, right?
Cool.
All right, that's it from the audience so far.
Yeah, Frank, and also one thing I noticed on this, when you were just going through that example, well, I noticed a couple of things. First of all, I'll point out that anything you have in quotes there, we can data drive that, data enable it. Mm-hmm. So these accessors, as well as being as friendly as they are, we can also put them into a file and have almost a GUI map, so that if we had that link in a few of our scripts and it was pointing to this particular button, we could just go and read that string from a file. Then if it did ever change, we just go and change that single location and all our scripts automatically work.
Yeah, great point.
Also, I noticed, and a lot of other people might have noticed this who have used other tools, I don't see any weights here, Frank, and I did explain right on the outset that one of the challenges of Ajax is all this timing and synchronization that's going on, and yet absent here any weights. So if I click that link at the start, the Ajax example, then I click this button here that you've got button start. Mm-hmm. How do I know that this page is ready for me to click that next link under that start unless I'm waiting around for it to happen?
Well, that's because when Appvance Enterprise brought up that web page, that HTML5 Ajax app, it automatically inspected all of the JavaScript that's in that page, and it added an Appvance proxy to each one of those function calls. So behind the scenes, Appvance Enterprise is going to instrument your Ajax app to make sure that it's testable, and that means that you don't have to write any pause commands or any wait for element present commands or any of those kind of wait commands at all, because Appvance Enterprise is going to take care of knowing when to execute the next step based on that proxy realizing that the function has been finished and the test is ready to move on to the next step. And just by doing that, using Appvance Enterprise UX avatar technology, I find that most of the test scripts that we're writing are about a third as long because they don't require that pause or wait stuff. And then most of the time, pause and wait are like the single biggest source of headaches for testers anyway, because they go wrong where the app is running at a different speed depending on what machine it's being played on.
Yeah, and also you're getting optimal timing for this, Frank, because I remember using another tool that we did have waits. We ran it overnight, and in fact we used to have to put a high tide mark on the wait because we had to make sure that we were, safely getting that screen in the right state to make that click. And what happened, if it failed, we just kept adding to the time.
Yeah.
And in the end, somebody did a little report, and we were waiting about 2 hours for all these scripts,
Right, just to pause.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And as we see here, this is going to get the optimal time. And that injection is happening both at record and playback time.
Right. The other thing to point out is that this is actually driving the app as the real end user would. The end user knows intuitively by just looking at the screen when to wait and then click the submit button. So that extra 2 hours of pause time means that the test isn't actually accurate to representing the end user experience, and that's where UX Avatar is really very strong.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. When we use the app ourselves, we see the visual cues. We see that screen refresh. We see the menu pop up, and we just go ahead and click it. And Appvance has got the smarts to pick up on that visual cue, if you will, in the background. So we talked about functional testing. Let's move on now to load and performance testing and some of the challenges that were thrown up with Ajax. And in fact, looking at this slide, the answer is fairly simple. We just take those functional tests that we've basically solved the problem with, and we repurpose them to be performance tests.
Right.
So we don't have another performance tool that we're going to whip out here and show you. We are going to just repurpose those exact same tests. They're going to pick up on the same timing. They're going to, as you say, Frank, do the same clicks that the browser would do. They're going to send the same HTTP traffic over that the real browser would do. That's going to take care of that Google search example we saw. If we go and do a Google search with a functional test, letter by letter, the test tool is going to create the HTTP traffic that is needed, and that is going to be repurposed and run from multiple instances as a performance test.
Right. And all of this even runs in the cloud. I remember the old days, I used to beg people, give me some equipment, that I can run this performance test on. Now the cloud gives us the ability to run as many browsers as we want. Appvance does the performance testing for Best Buy and PepsiCo and Deloitte and a whole bunch of other companies. And if PepsiCo is ready to do Super Bowl advertising and we need 50,000 virtual users to run concurrently, that's a single click of a mouse button in Appvance Enterprise to fire up the number of cloud instances that we need. And those cloud instances are inexpensive, plentiful, and they're geographically dispersed. So we can test from Singapore to Saudi Arabia and everywhere in between.
So we have a couple of questions from the audience. First question is, you're saying that you can repurpose functional testing scripts. I have lots of scripts in Selenium. Are you for real?
Oh, yeah. So we've been participating in the Selenium project for years now. And while we think Selenium is terrific, we also have seen kind of the ups and downs to it. So everything that we've shown you in the Appvance Enterprise Designer is additive to your Selenium efforts. As a matter of fact, there's no reason to throw away your existing Selenium scripts. Just run them in Appvance Enterprise. There's a Selenium script driver that supports both Selenium 1 and Selenium 2. And as a matter of fact, there's a tutorial in Appvance Enterprise that shows you how to use all of the WebDriver APIs in the Appvance Enterprise environment. Now, the advantage that you get by running your Selenium scripts in Appvance Enterprise is that we repurpose those to be a performance test immediately. We can run them on a grid of machines in your local data center or in the cloud or both. And we also give you this reporting mechanism that will analyze the results of your Selenium scripts running and identify performance bottlenecks that are in your app. It's really straightforward and easy.
All right, and I've got a couple more questions. It says that sometimes we do want to wait and just check if an object exists or not. Do you have an option for that?
Yes, we do. So there is a pause command, and there are wait for element present commands in the designer script language itself. And those are optional for you to use. And there's also in the designer script conditionals. So like if you want to do like if then else, you know, wait for an element to become present, and then if it is present with a certain value, then branch off to a different part of your test. Then yeah, that's supported in the designer too.
Fantastic.
And also, Tina, can just step in there because
Please.
I think in that question they were asking about assertions to make sure that elements are in fact on the screen that you expect. And we do have a whole keyword for asserting and validating that script as it's run. So just to finish off the answer to that question, we can assert and we can figure out exactly what's on that screen during the playback.
Excellent. We have two more questions. Actually, one's a question, one's a statement. So the question is, what cloud providers do you work with?
So currently Appvance Enterprise comes with the clients for Amazon Web Services for the EC2 system built in. It also has the clients for CollabNet and GoGrid. And we're in the process of adding the OpenStack clients, so that would cover like Rackspace Cloud and the other OpenStack partners.
Excellent. And finally, we had a statement from somebody in the audience that simply said, wow.
Oh.
So, all right, great. I'll turn it back over to you, gentlemen.
Yeah, so it's a good point about the cloud, Frank. And in fact, you know, the cloud has really enabled this type of repurposing when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's just the expansion of that computing power that has allowed us to repurpose those. And in a way, we can see how Appvance has kept up with technology in its solution. So in other words, we're chasing technology that in the problem space of Ajax, but we're actually enabling technology to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Rather than use tools that were around 10 years ago.
Yeah, I see it the same way. Those tools both haven't seemed to keep up with the innovative ways that developers are using HTML5, as well as the infrastructure of hosting an app in the cloud, you know, and being able to test it from the cloud.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I have a last-minute question. I think it looks like on this slide. Can Appvance detect jars embedded in HTML?
So normally the jars wouldn't be in HTML, but instead JavaScript packages would be there. If you had a jar that was on the app server that was going to output an Ajax or an HTML5 interface, then Appvance Enterprise would be able to test it. But you know, maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, and so you can always type in a follow-up that gives us some more definition about what your question is.
Okay, great. Yeah, if that question can add us some follow-up on specifics they're looking for, that'd be great. We have one final other question. What other, not final,
yes.
I'm glad to see the questions moving in, folks. Thank you. What tools other than Selenium are supported?
Oh, so the cool thing about the Appvance Enterprise architecture is that it supports a set of script runners. And we have script runners for Selenium, SoapUI, Sahi, Twist, for writing tests in JUnit using Java, to do the same thing in Ruby and Groovy and Python. So there's about 20 test scripts, script drivers altogether.
Okay, that's all we have for right now.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that, Frank. I didn't want to, you know, go there, but you know, because we're talking about Ajax, but all those, you know, languages you mentioned, we can repurpose all those tests as performance tests. So if you have some JUnit test hitting some API, functionally, we can just repurpose that the same way, and now you've got a, you know, JUnit spinning up all over the cloud, hitting your application that way. So, you know. Okay, so now we're going to talk about performance testing on the client. If we look at the nature of Ajax, as I said, it's highly asynchronous, and the clients now are built, they're very sensitive to time by this, and this is particularly true on the mobile, but also on the web. If the client expects an event to happen in a certain time, and there's some latency, it doesn't quite happen when it's expected, it is possible that now there's a defect in that client that the developer might not have picked up because it's only predicated on the context of the timing events that are going to take place when load is really on the back end. In other words, we're loading the back end, but we're also going to monitor the front end, the client, to see if there's any disruptive behavior based on that back end being tied up and us getting greater latency than we would have otherwise had. And this latency is created by packet loss, and I'm talking about on the networks. You know, you go on to 3G, you go 4G, you're going to get a bad reception, you're going to get more TCP connections. There's a lot of environmental conditions there that are going to impact the timing events on your client. So again, best practices, we're going to repurpose some of these, and as you saw all throughout the presentation, we are driving real browsers. So some of those browsers we can monitor, and as load is on the back end, we can now look at what is the real user experience on those front-end clients.
Great. We have one question. So when you mention mobile web, how do you handle testing over like a 3G network?
Well, so Appvance Enterprise tests at the app tier. So we're going to drive the app as though it's sitting on a mobile device. We have partners that we work with to make sure that the underlying network is working correctly, and then Appvance Enterprise, because it's driving the app at the app tier, can give you an analysis of, like, you know, where the app is failing and where the network is failing. We also have a performance monitor that sits on the app server and the load balancer and the database server that's going to be observing things like CPU network and memory utilization. And the correlated reports, those results reports, will show you the amount of CPU that's being used to drive while Appvance Enterprise is driving the app. So you know, if you're at 100 users and you've already used up 80% of your CPU, this will help you to forecast the amount of network bandwidth and the CPUs that you need. We don't do anything specific to like test to make sure that, like, you know, the 3G or 4G network is running at optimal speed. Instead, we partner with the companies that have specific products for that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, yeah, we can move on. Thanks, Frank. So, and you mentioned something there about monitoring CPU, net, memory, etc. And you were talking then, excuse me, about monitoring during the test or the verification. We can also, again, repurpose those tests, not only from functional to performance, but we can repurpose those tests to become monitors, predictive monitors. So we can be running those tests on production for the sole purpose of looking at latency, looking at the user experience. And this is, as I said, it's particularly key in a time-sensitive environment, or in an environment where people have got just different network conditions. So for us to know exactly how, you know, somebody on a smart app phone out in, I don't know, Kansas, what sort of experience are they having during, you know, some heightened activity on your server.
You're thinking about a tornado?
Yeah, tornado, I just picked one out.
Yeah. You know, one of our customers had an outage just last week, and what they found is that their developers who were working in a digital agency had pushed a change to the app. So they had run a performance test before the initial launch of this app, but they didn't run a performance test after this new push. And so what that showed one of our customers is that they have to get in this process of doing predictive monitoring. And that means you don't have to run a performance test 100% of the time. Like this customer would run at, say, 20,000 virtual user sessions in a 10-minute period during a performance test. But then they would keep, like, say, 500 of those virtual users up and running all the time. And by doing that, they could predictively monitor when the app was going viral if the app was delivering a poor end-user experience. And that's different than the kind of APM tools that are out there, the application performance monitoring tools. Those tools are pretty much set up to, like, tell you how bad the carnage was after you have an outage. Instead, with predictive monitoring, you're able to drive the app's end-user experience using these test scripts and do it in an ongoing basis. And by doing that, you'll uncover the software-related problems. And this customer's IT executive, he's told me time and time again, it's not the CPU network and memory that's at fault here. We can't throw more servers to solve the problem. Instead, it's the software. It's always the software.
Yeah. And I like that expression, going viral, Frank, because we all want our apps to do that, but are they really ready for that? And this predictive monitoring, you know, gets you ahead of that curve.
That's right.
You don't really want to slam into that wall when it happens. So that's just a great feature. Okay. So, here's your slide, Frank, about you were talking about those test nodes and how we repurpose tests.
Sure.
Maybe you could talk us through this one.
Sure. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on this because we have a separate webinar set up to dig into this agile continuous integration test environment for DevOps, and we'll be sending you notification when that webinar becomes available. The idea here is that on the left you have developers, business managers, and DevOps managers. The developers typically just want to work in code. You know, they'll make a source code check-in. Continuous integration environment like Jenkins or Hudson will automatically build the app, automatically deploy the app, and automatically call the Appvance Enterprise controller to say, hey, it's time for you to run the test against this app. The controller can work with a test management platform like Rally to see which stories need to be run to test this app. Those stories have related test cases, and all of that is stored in a test repository, which is typically something like Git. The tests themselves are run by the controller in a cloud instance, and the controller has the client to all of these cloud services, so the controller can automatically tell Amazon, hey, start up 40 or 50 cloud instances, with each of those instances running the test injector, the browser, and in the case of testing a SOAP or REST-based service, a SOAP UI project. And so it's the actual protocols that are being used to drive the application to talk to its back-end services. And all the while, this environment is recording the results of every step of the test into a results repository. So the business managers and the DevOps folks, the marketing folks, are able to receive a set of notifications automatically from the system, and even a set of dashboards like a scalability index and a dashboard showing you where the functional problems are.
So, gentlemen, there's a lot of talk in the industry right now about DevOps and continuous integration. So, one of the things that comes out of this slide is that, you know, Appvance is already enterprise ready and integrated with these systems. Mm-hmm. And again, it's kind of back to what you were saying earlier about repurposing what you already have. This isn't, you know, you have to rebuild from scratch kind of thing.
That's definitely right. So what a lot of people find, especially developers, is that the Appvance Enterprise really speaks their language. I mean, Appvance Enterprise is Java at its core. It's built around service-oriented architecture principles, and it is built to work within an agile environment. So continuous integration is great. So is DevOps for doing things like hot deploy and doing hot testing for those hot deployments.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Great slide. And as you mentioned, we're going to dig deeper into some of these boxes in future webinars. But yeah, that certainly pulls everything together.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the summary. Seems to have gone very fast. We started at the top really looking at Ajax, HTML5 as an enabling technology. You know, it's a fantastic technology, really. I mean, the users love it. User experience is very high. It has a strong future, and so it should have. It does bring with it these challenges that we've seen, because all is not serene under the surface. You have this swan gliding along and looks great under the surface. The legs are kicking to keep it balanced. All sorts of arrays being thrown out there on the screen. Challenges in terms of identifying objects that have changed. Challenges regarding timing events. And as you've seen, and you've demonstrated that, Frank, we're positioning Appvance for really QA expertise, rather than looking for expert coders to get in there and start using these regular expressions or XPaths. We're really trying to put this this framework in the hands of people who really understand their business and understand what needs to be verified to keep that enterprise up and running. We're also simulating the events through the real browser. I mean, there's no other way to say it. We've been injecting code that's going to kick off those APIs that the browser would kick off, and we're going to kick it off at exactly the right time. And just to reiterate, we're using a very reliable, maintainable method to identify those objects. Not only is it language, semantics, natural language, it's all very persistent. In other words, highly adaptable. As your screen changes, if needed, we can keep up with those changes. So all in all, I see a pattern there, Frank, and the pattern is really just using the tool to do the work for us. Mm-hmm. And we've, basically taken that paradigm and moved with it.
So I think we've got an audience member who's preempting one of our slides here. He just said, do you have a way for me to learn more about this? The answer is, please give us an email at sales@appvance.com or give us a phone call. It is toll-free in the U.S., 855-254-1164. We have a fabulous sales team. Ian is actually secretly part of that group. Mm-hmm. And we don't like to call him sales. He's Professor Test. Yeah. Right? But they will be happy to work with you and your team to understand what your needs are specifically. And, oh, hey.